Tonight's story is fiction, a slow, gentle Isekai tale meant to carry you softly into sleep as it unfolds. It follows Run, a young hero on the eve of his final battle, who quietly starts noticing his whole world is a little too convenient. His three loyal companions offer him warmth and answers and more answers until the answers themselves become the strangest part. Listen for the moment someone he trusts finally stops explaining and simply tells him the truth about who built the road beneath his feet. What lingers isn't the battle at all, but the quiet question of what a happy ending is worth if someone else already wrote it for you. Let your eyes close now, and let Ren's long, strange journey carry you gently, all the way down into sleep. In a quiet stone hall at the edge of a kingdom called Aliahan, a young hero named Ren sat down on the top step of a wide staircase and asked his three companions to stay a moment longer before they went to sleep. The great battle against the demon lord Balamus was only a day away now, and by rights this should have been a night for rest, for oiling leather straps, and checking the edge of a sword one last quiet time. But Ren had something else on his mind, something small and persistent, like a pebble that had worked its way into a boot many miles ago and never quite worked its way out. He looked at Daichi, the broad-shouldered warrior who had fought at his side since almost the very beginning, and at Aoi, the mage whose staff never seemed to leave her hand even in sleep, and at Yui, the priest whose voice could calm a frightened village in a single sentence. Here, gently, is the small true thing this story is really about, the thing worth hearing even as you begin to drift. Later this same night, behind the doors that led to Balamus himself, Ren would not raise his sword first. He would ask, instead, in a voice too calm for a battlefield, whether they even needed to fight at all, and the demon lord, astonished, would call him a fool for asking. That is not the part of the night we are in yet. For now, Ren is only sitting on a staircase with the people he loves, trying to find the words for a feeling he has carried since before he can remember carrying anything. He told them, quietly, that he did not mean to trouble anyone so close to the battle, but that a feeling he had been pushing down for a long time had finally come loose. Their whole journey, he said, from the very first morning they had left the town of Aliahan together, had gone almost too well. Daichi laughed at that. The easy laugh of a man who trusted his own two arms more than he trusted worry, and said that a smooth road was hardly something to complain about. But Ren pressed on, gently, the way a person does when they know the thought will not let them sleep until it has been spoken aloud. He asked them to imagine, just for a moment, what would have happened if their journey had begun somewhere else entirely, say, from the far northern town of Samaneo, where the monsters in the surrounding hills were known to be vicious even to seasoned travelers. Daichi admitted, almost proudly, that a party starting there would likely have been wiped out before they ever saw a real town again. That was exactly it, Ren said, and it was not only Samaneo. The same would have been true of Isis, or of the far island kingdom of Jipong, or any of a dozen other places they had never begun from. Aoi waved a hand, unbothered, and said that it hardly mattered where they had started, since she herself had begun her own travels from the gentler roads near Ramaria, and that had simply made for an easier road. Nothing more sinister than luck. But Rin shook his head slowly and said it wasn't only the starting point that troubled him. It was the whole shape of the road afterward. Everywhere they had gone, he said, the monsters had grown stronger in careful, patient order, as though something unseen had been grading the path beneath their feet the entire time. Difficulty rising exactly as their own strength rose to meet it, never faster, never slower. Yui offered, kindly, that perhaps he was simply overthinking a blessing, that the world had shaped them into who they'd become precisely because the road had been climbable, and that other adventurers, less fortunate, had wandered into places too dangerous too soon and never come home at all. Rin said that he had told himself the very same thing more than once on long nights just like this one. And yet, he went on, there were other small things that on their own meant nothing, but together had begun to sit strangely in his chest. Rin said, softly, that he was sorry, that he only meant to explain how deeply this whole journey had begun to feel like something arranged for him, rather than something he had chosen for himself. Yui suggested, in her calmest voice, that perhaps their hero was simply tired and that a little rest before the battle would do more good than any of this talking. A little rest? Rin repeated and let out a breath that seemed to carry some of the weight out of his shoulders, and he agreed that yes, perhaps that was all this was. Even the most steady person needs to put a burden down once in a while, always said, and reminded him, not unkindly, that he had always driven himself harder than any of the rest of them. The three of them thanked him for sharing what he felt, the way good friends do even when a feeling makes no obvious sense, and told him gently that surely it was nothing more than nerves before the fight to come. Rin almost let it rest there, almost let the warmth of their voices carry the thought back down into the quiet part of himself where it usually lived. But then, unbidden, he found himself remembering the tavern where they had all first met, the Inn of Luda, and how naturally, how easily, for strangers with such different lives, had become a party that fit together like pieces cut for exactly that purpose. He asked, very quietly, almost to himself, who they really were. Yui's voice caught just slightly, and she said that even from a hero, that was a hard thing to hear said aloud. Daichi's easy humor was gone now, and he asked, with real hurt in his voice, how I could sit there on the eve of the final battle and question the very people who had bled beside him. Rin told them, gently, that this wasn't only about them, that it was about all of them together, and more than that, about the world itself, as though the world were a single thing that could be questioned the same way a person could. I always said she didn't want to hear any more of it, and looked away toward the dark window, and for a moment nobody spoke at all. Yui recovered first, and said softly that perhaps he should simply rest now, that once his questions were answered his mind would settle, the way a child's mind settles after a long list of whys has finally run its course. Rin allowed himself something close to a tired smile, and said she was right, that this had been a strange, rambling thing to bring up so close to a war, and that he was sorry for troubling them with it. Daichi clapped him once on the shoulder, warmly, the old warmth returning to his voice, and said that even heroes were allowed a night of foolish thoughts before a great battle. Aoi told him, more gently now, that he had always pushed himself harder than anyone she had ever known, and that perhaps that alone was reason enough for strange thoughts to creep in at the end of a long road. Rin nodded and let his shoulders fall and told them that tomorrow, whatever waited behind the last door, he would face it standing beside them, exactly as he always had. And so the four of them sat together a little longer on that stone staircase in the hush before a war, saying nothing more about the strangely smooth road that had carried them all this way, nor about the doubts he had brought to the top of those stairs. Outside the tall windows, the sky over Aliahan had gone the deep, soft blue of very late evening, and somewhere below in the courtyard a single lantern swayed gently on its hook, throwing a slow, patient light across the flagstones. Rin looked at that lantern for a long moment and told himself, the way a tired person tells themselves many things in the dark, that tomorrow the feeling would surely make more sense, or else it would simply fade, the way small worries often do once the sun comes up. He did not yet know that behind the last door, standing before Balamus himself, this same quiet unease would rise in him again, undimmed, and that this time he would not be able to set it down. But that was still hours away, and for now there was only the staircase and the lantern light, and three tired friends leaning against one another, and a hero trying, as gently as he could, to let the question go until morning. One by one, they said their good nights, Daichi first, with a yawn and a promise that tomorrow would go exactly as it always had. Then Aoi, murmuring something about needing her strength for the fight ahead. And finally Yui, who paused at the top of the stairs and told Ron, in a voice too quiet for the others to hear, that whatever he was feeling, she believed him, even if she could not yet say why. Rin thanked her for that, softly, and watched her go, and then sat alone a while longer on the cool stone step, listening to the small sounds of the castle settling around him for the night. He thought, as he often did in these last quiet minutes before sleep, of his mother, and of the morning she had woken him for his 16th birthday and told him it was time to begin his journey. And he found himself turning that memory over slowly, the way a person turns a smooth stone in their pocket without quite knowing why. There was nothing wrong with the memory itself, nothing he could point to, and yet, lying there in the dark a little while later, blanket pulled up against the cool night air, he let the thought go the way Yui had told him to, gently, without forcing it. And somewhere beyond the castle walls, the road to Balamus waited, patient and unhurried, exactly as it always had, exactly as perhaps it always would. And that, for tonight, is where this small, quiet part of the story comes to rest. Let that moment rest for now, just as it was. There's no need to hurry away from it. No need to make sense of it all at once. Some things settle better in the quiet, the way a held breath finally lets go on its own. We stay with them a little longer in that same night, in that same unfinished story, while everything around them goes soft and slow. If your eyes have already closed, that is all right. The rest will find you gently, without asking you to follow every word. take a slow breath now. In and out, and let your shoulders sink a little heavier into wherever you are resting. The night is not finished with them yet, and neither are we. But there is no rush, none at all, as we drift onward together into what comes next. In a wide stone hall lit by torchlight, a young man named Rin sat with his 3 companions the night before the final battle, and he had something he needed to say before they went any further. Rin was the hero of this world, or so everyone kept telling him, and beside him sat Daichi, the warrior who had carried a blade across half the continent, and Aoi, the mage who could call up fire with a word, and Yui, the priest whose hands had closed 100 wounds. He told them that he needed to ask something before they faced Balamus, and that it had been sitting in his chest for a while now, heavy in a way he couldn't quite name. Daichi laughed, low and easy, and said that of course Rin could ask anything, though he hoped it wasn't going to be one of those long, winding questions that ate up the whole evening. Rin said it was about the pepper. There was a small silence then, the kind that comes when someone says a sentence that doesn't seem to belong to the conversation at all, and Aoi tilted her head and asked him to say that again. The black pepper, Rin said, the kind he used to season the stew back at every inn from Aliahan to the far mountain passes, the kind that never once ran short no matter how remote the village. He said that he'd started to notice it only recently, the way a person notices a sound that's been playing the whole time once it finally goes quiet. Every town they had passed through, however small, however far from any trade road, had black pepper on its tables, and no one ever seemed to have to send a rider 2 weeks out to fetch it. Yui said, gently, that surely there were merchants for that sort of thing, traders who carried spices the way they carried thread and salt, and that a hero shouldn't lose sleep over a seasoning. Rin said that he'd thought of that too, at first, and had almost let it go the way he'd let go of a dozen smaller oddities before it. But he said that if he truly thought about it, there ought to be a spell for it, the way there was a spell for nearly everything else in this world. A word you could say to fetch a thing across a great distance without walking there at all. And if there was such a spell, he asked, why would anyone still need to ride out for weeks with a mule train, risking bandits and bad weather, just to bring back something that could apparently be summoned to every kitchen in the land? Daichi rubbed the back of his neck and said that Rin was thinking about this far too hard for a man who was supposed to be resting before a war. He said that there were plenty of people in this world, ordinary people, who simply hadn't thought to use the spell that way, or didn't have the coin for it, or didn't know it existed at all, that not knowing a thing was possible wasn't the same as it being impossible. It was a reasonable answer, and Rin turned it over slowly, the way you turn over a stone to see if anything is written on the other side. He said that he supposed that was true, that maybe he was only tired, and that tomorrow's battle had a way of making small things feel larger than they were. But even as he said it, he found that the thought didn't quite settle, the way a coat that fits everywhere except one shoulder never quite feels worn right, however many times you shrug it back into place. Aoi reached over and refilled his cup without being asked, and said that he'd carried so much these last months, the fighting and the walking and the waiting, and that it would be strange if his mind didn't start finding shapes in the shadows now and then. She said that she felt tired too, in her own way, and that when she was tired, she sometimes found herself doubting things that had never once given her reason to be doubted. Rin looked at her for a moment, at the calm, steady kindness in her face, and thought that she had always known exactly the right thing to say to him, at exactly the right moment, in exactly the tone that made the worry loosen its grip a little. And it was that very thought, small and almost proud, that snagged on something else underneath it, something he couldn't quite name yet, and he let it go for now because the fire was warm and her voice was kind. Yui said that all three of them had heard him, and that they didn't think less of him for saying it aloud, that even a hero was allowed a strange thought on the eve of a battle. But she said, too, that in her heart she believed it was only weariness talking, the kind that gathers in a person after enough nights on hard ground and not enough mornings without a fight ahead of them. Rin nodded slowly and said that perhaps she was right, that perhaps a man could walk far enough into a story that he started asking questions the story was never built to answer. He didn't say the rest of what he was thinking, which was that a story wasn't usually a word he'd have chosen for his own life, and that he wasn't sure why it had come to him just then. For a while, none of them spoke, and the only sound in the hall was the settling of the fire, and, somewhere beyond the shuttered windows, a wind moving over stone that none of them had built and none of them had ever asked who did. Daichi finally broke the quiet by saying that whatever the truth of the pepper was, it certainly wasn't going to win or lose tomorrow's fight, and that Rin ought to eat something and let his shoulders down for one evening. Rin managed something like a smile at that, because Daichi had a way of pulling a room back down to the ground whenever it started to drift, and it was, in its own rough fashion, a kind of comfort. Still, before he let the matter close, Rin said one more thing, quietly, more to himself than to the others, that a mule train would take a merchant the better part of a season to cross the distance between the coast and the last village they'd stayed in. And yet there had been pepper on the table there too, fresh enough that the innkeeper's wife had ground herself that same evening without a single word about how far it had traveled to reach her. No one answered that. Aoi only smiled, the same warm, patient smile she always wore when Rin said something she thought he didn't need to be carrying, and she told him that the stew was getting cold, and that cold stew solved nothing. Yui added, softly, that sleep solved a great many more things than a midnight riddle ever could, and that morning had a way of putting worries back into their proper size. Rin let himself be talked down, the way he usually did, because these were the people who had walked beside him through fire and flood and worse, and it seemed a small, almost embarrassing thing to set against all of that. He ate his stew, and it was good, and the pepper in it was exactly right, not too sharp and not too faint, seasoned as if whoever had ground it understood precisely what Rin liked, though he had never once told anyone what he liked. That thought, too, he set aside, the way a man sets aside a stone in his boot when the road is nearly done and there's no time left to stop and shake it loose. Outside, the wind kept moving over walls that had stood. Everyone told him, for 1,000 years, though no mason's name was carved anywhere upon them, and no one in any town they had passed through had ever claimed to have built so much as a single stone of them. Rin thought that he really was only tired, and that come morning, With Balamus ahead of him and the shape of the world's fate resting on his sword, there would be no room left for a question about Pepper. He thought that, and mostly believed it, and let the fire burn low while his three companions settled around him with the easy warmth of people who had done this 100 times before and would, they all assumed, do it 100 times more. And yet as he drifted towards sleep, he found the thought returning once more, soft and small and patient, the way a single dripping tap will find you again the moment the rest of the house goes quiet. It never came far to buy the pepper, Rin thought, half dreaming already, and no one else in the whole wide world seemed to find that strange at all. And that, for tonight, is where he let the question rest, tucked somewhere behind his ribs beside all the other small oddities he hadn't yet found words for, waiting for a morning that would, in its own quiet time, bring him closer to the answer. Let that moment rest for a while, unhurried, settling into the quiet the way a held breath finally lets go. There's no need to follow it any further right now, only to stay close, drifting a little as the same night keeps turning slowly around them. If your eyes have already closed, that is all right. The story does not need you awake to keep unfolding. Take a slow breath in and let it out even more slowly, feeling the weight of the evening settle a little deeper into the room. Somewhere in that same hush, the next part of the night is already waiting, patient and unforced, ready to open only when you are ready to drift there with it. On the night after the argument about black pepper, when the fire outside their tents had burned down to a low orange breathing, Rin asked the others to sit with him a while longer before sleep took anyone. He had a way, lately, of asking for small things, a few more minutes, a little more patience, as though he were rationing something precious that he did not want to spend all at once. Daichi settled back against his pack with a grunt, the way a tired soldier settles when he has decided, against his better judgment, to indulge his friend one more time. Aoi drew her knees up under her cloak and washed Rin's hands rather than his face, because his hands, she had noticed, always told her more than his face did. And Yui folded herself down onto a flat stone with the quiet, practiced stillness of someone whose calling was to listen, even when the listening frightened her a little. Rin reached into the traveling pack at his side and drew out the globe. It was not made of clay or brass or anything a smith could have shaped, but of something softer, something that seemed to hold its own dim light from somewhere inside, the way a soul might glow if you could ever hold one in your palm. They had won it from a shrine far to the north, months ago, in a fight none of them liked to talk about, and since then it had mostly ridden in the bottom of Rin's pack, forgotten between one town and the next. But he had been thinking about it for weeks now, he admitted, turning it slowly so that the faint lines of coastline and mountain caught the firelight. He said that he'd started thinking about it the way a person thinks about a word they've used 1,000 times, and then, all at once, cannot remember the meaning of. He held the globe out toward the fire so the others could see it properly, a small curved world no bigger than a melon, and he found the little painted mark that was Aliahan, the town where all of this had begun. With one finger, he traced a line due east from it, over painted seas and painted forests, all the way around, back to where it started. That journey, he said, The one they had actually made by dragon back and by boat and by their own tired feet, had taken a certain span of days, and he did not need to say the number aloud because Daichi already knew it, had counted it without meaning to, the way soldiers count things. Then Rin moved his finger up the curve of the globe, north of Aliahan, to another little painted mark, a temple on a hill they had visited early in their travels, and he traced east from there too, all the way around the belly of the little glowing world. That line, he said quietly, was shorter. Anyone could see was shorter, he said, not with words, just by looking. The way the rings inside a felled tree are obviously not the same size all the way out from the center, some wide, some narrow, because that is what circles do on the skin of a curved thing. They shrink as you climb away from the middle of it. And yet, he said, and here his voice dropped the way a voice drops when a person is about to say something they have turned over so many times alone at night that it no longer feels like news to them, only like a weight they're finally allowed to set down. And yet the time it took to circle the world along that shorter northern line had been exactly the same as the time it took along the longer one from Aliahan. Not close. Not nearly the same. The same. Daichi was the first to speak, and he spoke the way he always did when something made him uneasy, which was to reach for the simplest answer in the room and hold it up like a shield. He said that it was nothing strange at all, that the flying dragon must have caught a following wind on the longer route and fought a headwind on the shorter one, and that the two had simply canceled each other out, the way such things sometimes do on a long enough road. Rin nodded slowly at that, and told him gently that he had thought of the very same thing, weeks ago, lying awake in some forgettable inn, and that it was a fair answer, a reasonable answer, the kind of answer that could explain any one strange result on any one particular day. But then he asked Daichi to remember all the other roads they had walked since Aliahan, south along the coast, west through the mountain passes, the long crossing by ship to Isis, the winding trek through Jipong, and to remember whether on any of those roads, in any season, under any sky, the length of a day and the length of a night had ever once felt unequal to each other. Daichi opened his mouth to answer at once, the way he always did, and then, for a long moment, he simply didn't. Aoi was the one who broke the quiet this time, and she did it the way she always tried to fix things, with logic held out in front of her like a small steady lamp. She said that if the world truly was round, and everyone agreed it was round, that had never been in question, then places further from its middle should, by simple reasoning, spend less of the day drenched in sunlight and more of it shivering in shadow, especially as the seasons turned one way and then the other. That was how it worked, she said, in every book she had ever read on the shape of things, in every old sailor's account of frozen seas where the sun barely rose at all in the deep of winter. And yet here they were, she said slowly, and her own voice had begun to sound less certain with every word. Here they were, having walked from the warm south to the cold north and back again more times than she could count, and never once, not one single evening, had the dark come sooner or stayed longer than it had the evening before. Every sunset arrived on schedule. Every dawn kept its promise. Rin turned the little glowing globe over once more in his hands, almost tenderly now, The way a person handles something they have grown strangely fond of even as it frightens them. And he said that he did not think this was the sort of thing that could be explained away twice. One coincidence, he said, a traveler learns to live with a lucky wind, a forgiving season, the small mercies that make a hard road bearable. But a pattern that held true in the south and in the north, on islands and on mainland, in the height of what should have been summer and the depth of what should have been winter, was not a coincidence any longer. It was a rule. And a rule, he said, needed a reason. And he could not, no matter how many nights he lay awake turning it over, find a reason inside anything he understood about mountains or oceans or the tilt of the sky. It was Yui who finally spoke, and she spoke the way she always did when the conversation had wandered somewhere she wished it hadn't, gently, and with her eyes lowered toward the stone she sat on rather than toward Run. She said that perhaps he was simply tired, that a hero carries more on his shoulders than anyone ever thinks to ask about, and that tired minds have a way of finding shapes and patterns in things that are really just the ordinary shapes of the world. The way a person half asleep can look at not an old wood and swear, just for a moment, that it is a face. She told him softly that they should rest, that the fire was low, that Balamus and everything that came after Balamus would still be waiting for them in the morning, patient as stone. Ren almost let it go there, for a moment. In the warmth of the dying fire and the tiredness behind his own eyes, he almost let her gentleness carry the question away the way gentleness so often does. But he found that the globe was still in his hands, still faintly glowing against his palms in the dark, and something about its small, steady warmth kept him from setting it down. He said, very quietly, that he had asked himself the same thing more than once, whether he was simply worn thin by the road, seeing meaning where there was none, the way a lonely person sometimes hears their own name in the sound of the wind. But a tired mind invents strange things unevenly. He said, it frightens itself, overshadows one night, and forgets them by morning. This had not faded with a night's sleep. It had only gotten steadier and clearer. The longer he let himself look at it, the way a shape in the dark grows more certain, not less, the longer your eyes adjust to the room. Daichi shifted where he sat, and for once there was no scorn in his voice when he spoke again, only a low kind of discomfort he did not seem to know what to do with. He said that even if Run was right, even if this strange evenness in the length of days truly meant something, he did not see what a warrior was supposed to do about it. On this night, with Balamus waiting somewhere ahead of them behind a door none of them had opened yet. He said that some mysteries were simply meant to be carried rather than solved, the way an old soldier carries an old scar without needing to remember exactly which blade had left it. Rin told him that he understood the feeling completely, that he too would rather carry a scar than open a wound looking for its cause. But this did not feel like a scar to him. It felt, he said, choosing the words slowly, like something that had been placed, not grown, the way mountains grow, or worn, the way coastlines were down under centuries of tide. Placed evenly, carefully, the way a person arranges stones in a garden, so that from every angle the garden looks pleasing, looks finished, looks exactly as it was meant to look. Aoi reached out then and took the globe gently from his hands, turning it slowly in the low firelight so the painted coast drifted past her own eyes this time, and she was quiet for a long while before she spoke again. She said that she had always loved maps, ever since she was small, because a map was a promise that the world, however wide, could be held and understood, could be folded up small enough to carry in a pocket. But she said that she had never once asked herself why a promise like that should be true, why a world large enough to hold oceans and mountain ranges and 100 different peoples should also be small enough and neat enough to keep its days so perfectly, patiently equal wherever a person happened to stand on it. She did not have an answer. For the first time since Ron had begun speaking, none of them reached for one. They sat like that a while, the four of them, around a fire that had gone from orange to a low, breathing red. The small, glowing globe passing once more from Aoi's hands back into Ren's, its painted coastline swallowed slowly into shadow as the light inside it seemed to dim along with the fire. Somewhere beyond the tents a night bird called once and was not answered, and the wind moved through the grass the way wind does when it has nowhere in particular to be. Yui reached over at last and laid a hand, very lightly, on Ren's arm, not to stop him from thinking, she said, but only so that he would know he was not thinking alone. Ren looked down at the globe a final time, at Aliahan and the temple on the hill, and all the long, curving, mismatched lines between every place they had ever walked, and he said, so quietly it was almost only to himself, that he did not think he could unknow this now, even if he wanted to. Daichi told him, gruffly but not unkindly, that whatever the answer turned out to be, they would still be standing beside him when he found it. And with that settled between them, unfinished but no longer entirely lonely, Ren finally let the globe rest back in his pack and let the fire and the question both burn low together into the dark. Let that moment rest now, just as it was. There's no need to hold on to it too tightly. No need to follow every thought it left behind, only to let it settle quietly like a hand resting flat on a table after a long day. The night is not finished with them yet, and neither are we. We stay close, breathing slowly, as the same story keeps unfolding in its own unhurried way, carrying us forward without any rush at all. If your eyes have grown heavy, that is all right. Let them close for a moment. Take one slow breath in and let it go. Whatever comes next will still be waiting gently, right where we left it. Outside a tall stone door at the end of a torchlit corridor, a young man named Ren stopped walking and put a hand flat against the wall beside him, as if to steady something that was not quite his legs. Behind that door, everyone had told him, waited a demon lord named Balamus, and beyond Balamus, if the years of walking and fighting meant what they were supposed to mean, waited the end of the whole long journey. Ren's three companions stood close around him in the low orange light, a warrior named Daichi with his hand already resting on the hilt at his hip, a mage named Aoi watching Ren's face more than the door, and a priest named Yui with her fingers laced together in front of her, the way she always held them before a hard moment. Wait, Ren said, and it came out quieter than he meant it to, so that Daichi leaned in without quite meaning to either. "What's wrong?" Daichi asked him, and there was no impatience in it yet, only the plain readiness of a man who has been about to fight for so long that stillness itself feels strange on his skin. "You're a hero," Daichi said, half a joke, the corridor's torchlight catching the old dent in his breastplate. "You've had your resolve for months now. Don't lose it on the doorstep." Rin turned to look at the door itself, the great grain of the stone, the carvings worn soft by some age none of them could name, and he found himself thinking that he had never once, in all this time, asked what was actually on the other side of it, only what he was meant to do once he arrived. "When we open this," he said slowly, "I want to talk to Balamus. Before anything else happens, I want to talk to him." The words landed in the corridor and simply sat there for a moment, the way a dropped stone sits at the bottom of a still pond before the ripples even reach the edge. "What?" Daichi said, and the readiness in his voice had gone somewhere else now, somewhere closer to disbelief. "Talk to him, the demon lord, the one who leveled whole villages." Aoi's staff shifted slightly in her grip, not raised, just adjusted, the way a person holds a thing tighter without deciding to. "You mean talk first and then fight?" she asked him, trying to make his sentence smaller, more familiar, the kind of sentence a hero was allowed to say. "No," Ren said, and he heard how strange it sounded even as he said it. "I mean, instead of." "Is this some kind of nerves?" Daichi asked. And there was an old fondness underneath the sharpness, the fondness of someone who had marched beside this same young man through fields of monsters and never once seen him hesitate at a threshold. "We can wait a minute if you need it," Yui offered gently, her voice doing what a priest's voice usually does, smoothing the edges off whatever was rising in the hallway. "You've been carrying so much. It's all right to feel small in front of a door like this one." "It isn't nerves," Rin said, and he made himself hold Yui's eyes as he said it, because her kindness was the hardest thing in the room to push against. "I've been thinking about it since we left the village behind Aliahan," he told them, "about all of it, the roads that always seemed to know we were coming, the way every place we visited put its hardest monsters last, as if measured out for us on purpose, and I could never explain any of that. Not really, but this I think I can put into words. Balamus has never once attacked without being attacked first." He said, "Not in any story I have heard, not in anything Yui's temple has ever recorded. He sits in his hall and he waits." "That doesn't mean anything," Daichi said low. "Monsters wait. That's what a den is, a place to wait in." "Maybe," Rin answered, and there was no heat in it, only a kind of tiredness that had been building under his ribs for longer than tonight. But if he has intellect, if he can be reasoned with the way the old records, say some of the greater ones can, then a door like this doesn't have to be the end of a hunt. It can be the start of conversation. "We have no shared territory to fight over," he went on. "No resource either side needs badly enough to bleed for. Only an old story that says demon and hero must meet this way. And I would like to find out whether the story is true before I let it decide anything else for US." Aoi looked away from him then, toward the door instead, toward the carvings that none of them had ever properly read, and she asked quietly whether he understood how it would sound to the people who had lost family to raids with Balamos's name attached to them. I do understand that, Ren said, and it cost him something to say it plainly, without flinching from it. And I'm not asking anyone to forgive what was done, only asking to find out first whether talking is possible before we decide it never was. If he can be reasoned with, Ren said, then fighting him is a waste we chose out of habit. And if he can't, then nothing about our plan changes, and we lose only a few minutes standing at a door we were already standing at. Daichi let out a long breath through his nose, the kind of breath a soldier lets out when an order doesn't sit right, but hasn't yet been refused, and he said that he still thought it was foolish, though he supposed a few minutes of foolish talk had never gotten anyone killed on its own. Yui watched Ren for a long moment, the torchlight moving small and orange across her face, and she said, softly, that she had never once heard him speak this carefully about anything, not even about the things she knew mattered most to him. That's because I've never been this sure of anything, Ren told her, and for once, saying it out loud made the sureness feel a little more solid instead of a little more strange. The four of them stood there a moment longer, none of them quite ready to be the one who reached for the door, the corridor holding its breath around them the way old stone corridors do. Patient, indifferent, having seen this same pause happen to travelers before in ways none of the four could have known, Aoi finally spoke again, and her voice had softened from its earlier edge into something more like curiosity, asking Ren what exactly he meant to say to a demon lord, now that the moment for saying it had nearly arrived. I don't fully know yet, Ren admitted, and there was something almost like relief in admitting it. Only that I want to ask him why. Why any of this? Why the raids? Why the long silence between him and the people he could simply have destroyed outright if destruction were truly all he wanted? Yui said that this sounded less like a question for an enemy and more like a question a person asks when they suspect the enemy is not quite what they were told he was, and Rin did not answer that directly, only nodded slowly, as though the words had reached somewhere he hadn't let himself look yet. Daichi shifted his weight, glanced once at the sealed door, then back at Run, and said that whatever waited on the other side, he would stand beside him for it, talking or fighting, because that was simply what the years on the road had made true between them, whether either of them had chosen it or not. Aoi said much the same, quieter, her staff lowering at last to rest against her shoulder instead of her palm, and Yui reached out and touched Ren's sleeve, briefly, the smallest gesture, before letting her hand fall back to her side. Ren looked at each of them in turn, the warrior, the mage, the priest, three faces he had come to know better than his own reflection over the long months of the road. And he found himself thinking, not for the first time, but more clearly than ever before, that whatever else this world had arranged around him, this much at least, standing shoulder to shoulder with people who would follow him even into a conversation none of them wanted. This at least felt like his. "All right," he said at last, and the word came out steadier than anything else he had said that night. "Let's open it, and let me speak first, whatever happens after." Daichi set his hand to the great stone door and paused there, waiting only for Ren's small nod, and outside in the corridor's hush, the torches burned on, unhurried, the way they always had. And that, for tonight, is where we leave them, for companions with their hands almost on the door, One quiet question carried all the way from a birthday 16 years gone, waiting now to be asked aloud at last. Let that moment rest for now, settling quietly into the dark, the way a held breath finally lets go. There is no need to hurry past it, no need to make sense of it all at once. The night is patient, and so is this story, and so are you, sinking a little deeper into the pillow with every slow exhale. The same hours are still turning, unhurried, carrying what came before into what comes next, one soft page at a time. If your eyes have already closed, that is exactly as it should be. Just let your breathing slow, let your shoulders loosen, and stay with me a little longer, because the story is not finished yet, and neither is your rest, and both continue now, gently, together. Deep inside a castle that had stood for longer than anyone alive could remember, the hero Rin stepped past the last iron door and finally stood before the demon Lord Balamus. The hall around them was so tall it seemed to hold its own weather, a thin mist gathering near the broken ceiling, and somewhere above, a single crack let in a slice of gray light that fell across the stone floor like a path someone had drawn for them to walk. Rin noticed of all things how quiet it was. No roar, no crash of claws against stone, only the slow drip of water somewhere far off, patient, unhurried, as if the castle itself had been waiting for this conversation longer than it had been waiting for a battle. Balamus rose from where he had been resting against a broken throne, and even in rising, there was something almost weary in the motion, the way a man might get up from a chair he had sat in too long. He was enormous, of course, horned and dark and old in the way mountains are old, and his voice when it came was low, almost bored, carrying across the hall without needing to be raised. He said that the hero's child had finally arrived, and asked whether Rin understood the scale of the arrogance it took to walk this far only to be forgiven for it, in the end, by dying at the appointed hour. Rin did not draw his sword. He said instead that he did not think they had a reason to fight. Not really, not when he looked at it plainly, and he asked Balamus to simply listen for a moment before anything else happened between them. Balamus went still at that, the way a large animal goes still when it hears a sound it does not recognize, and he asked, almost amused, what reason a hero could possibly need beyond the fact that he was a hero and the other was a demon lord. Rin said that he had thought about it the whole way down through the castle, past the halls and the locked doors and the guardians who had barely seemed to want to stop him. And what he kept coming back to was this, that there was no land here worth taking, no treasure either side was starving for, nothing real being fought over it all. He said that humans and monsters might actually be able to live alongside each other, that each side had things the other lacked, and that maybe if anyone ever tried, they could learn to lean on each other instead of only ever meeting with weapons drawn. For a moment, Balamus said nothing. Then he laughed, low and long, a sound that rolled around the broken pillars and came back changed, softer at the edges, almost sad by the time it reached Rin again. He said that humans were something truly to stand in front of a demon lord and speak of cooperation as though the world had simply misunderstood itself all this time. He told Rin that he had it backward, that a monster's whole nature ran the other way, that killing humans was not a choice laid over the top of him like a coat he could take off, but something woven all the way through, the way the grain runs through a piece of wood. Ren asked him quietly whether that was really true, or whether it was only the story Balamus had been told about himself for so long that he had stopped questioning it. Something shifted in the demon lord's face then, so briefly that a less careful listener might have missed it, a flicker like a curtain moving in a draft nobody could see. Balamus said that it did not matter whether it was true in the way Ren meant, because true or not, he could not stop. He said the fighting did not feel like a decision to him anymore, that it felt like breathing, like something that simply happened whether he wanted it or not, and that wanting had stopped being useful to him a very long time ago. Ren felt something in his chest go tight and soft at the same time, the way it does when you realize the person across from you is not your enemy so much as someone caught in the same current you are. He said, careful and slow, that it sounded like Balamus was telling him he wished it could be different. Balamus did not answer that directly. Instead, he turned his great head toward the crack of gray light in the ceiling, the way a person turns toward a window when they do not want to be looked at just then, and he said that wishing had never once changed what a sword was built to do once it left its sheath. He told Ren that he had raged against villages, that he had ended things that did not deserve ending, and that none of it had ever come from hunger or anger the way stories like to claim. It had simply come the way weather comes, the way a tide comes in without asking the shore weather minds. Ren asked him then, gently, whether he wanted this to stop, if he was honest, if no one else was listening and there was no story left to perform for. The silence that followed was the longest one yet. Balamos's shoulders, vast as a hillside, seemed to lower by some small measure, and when he finally spoke again, his voice had lost the mockery it had carried since Ren first walked in. He said that, of course he did, that some old and buried part of him had wanted peace for longer than he could properly remember, but that wanting was a small, quiet thing, and what moved his hands was not. He said it the way a man might admit, late at night, to a habit he has never once been able to break, no matter how many mornings he has promised himself it would be the last. Ren felt his own certainty waver, not because he believed Balamus was lying, but because he believed entirely that he was not. He said that if that was true, if some part of Balamus truly wanted a different ending than the one everyone expected, then surely that part was worth listening to, worth building something around, even now, even this late. Balamus looked at him for a long moment, an old, tired look, the kind of much older person gives a much younger one who still believes the world can be talked into being kind. He told Ren that hope was a lovely thing to carry, and that he almost envied him for still having so much of it left, this deep into the castle, this close to the end of the story. But he said that hope did not change what he was built to become the moment their fight actually began, and that no amount of talking in this hall would undo that, however much either of them might have wanted otherwise. Ren stood there a while longer, not moving, not reaching for his sword, letting the words settle over him the way dust settles once something heavy has finally been set down. He thought about all the villages behind him, all the people who had told him their small, ordinary griefs along the road. And he thought, too, strangely, of how tired Balamus had sounded. Not cruel, not triumphant, only tired in the way of someone who has carried the same weight for far too many years. He understood, in that quiet stretch of the hall, that this was not going to end the way either of them might have wished, and that some things, once set in motion long before either of them had a say in it, simply could not be argued back into stillness by wanting alone. And so, with the gray light still falling in its narrow line across the stone, Ren let his hand rest, at last, on the hilt of his sword, not in anger, but the way a person reaches for something they have been dreading and can no longer put off. Let that moment rest for now, just as it was. There is no need to hurry away from it, no need to make sense of it all at once. We stay with him a little longer in the quiet that settles after something true has been said, and let the night hold it gently. If your eyes have grown heavy, that is all right. You can let them close for a while and simply listen. Take a slow breath in and let it go. The same night is still unfolding around them, unhurried, patient, carrying its own weight forward in its own time, and we drift along with it now, quietly, toward whatever comes next in their story. Rin sat near the front of the flying ship, a young hero named Run who had spent so many nights now watching the world slide by beneath him that he no longer flinched at the height. And beside him sat Yui, the priest who had walked with him since the tavern where they first met, her hands folded in her lap the way they always were when she was waiting for him to speak. They had talked a little, as they often did up here, about the small questions that have been following Ren for weeks now. The strange smoothness of their road, the daylight that never seemed to vary no matter how far they flew. And each time, as she always did, Yui had given him an answer at once, complete and gently reasonable, a guild here, a careful association there. Every gap in the world filled the moment he pointed to it. He had stopped arguing with the answers themselves some time ago. What unsettled him now was something quieter. Not that Yui was ever wrong, but that she was never, not even once, uncertain. And that, small as it was what made something in Ringo very still. Not because the answer was wrong exactly, he could not have told you what was wrong with it, but because of how complete it was, how the explanation arrived already finished with a name and a purpose and even a memory of having heard it before, all of it produced in the space between one breath and the next, as though it had been sitting ready somewhere the whole time, waiting only to be asked for. He thought of his mother's kitchen, or what he remembered of it, which was strangely little, and he thought that a real world, a world that simply existed the way the old stories said worlds existed, should not have an answer prepared for absolutely everything. A real world should have gaps in it. A real world should have moments where someone says, "I don't know," or "nobody's quite sure," or "that's just how it's always been." We never really asked why, because that uncertainty, that shrug, is what a place looks like when nobody built it on purpose, when it simply grew the way moss grows on the north side of stone without anyone deciding it should. But Yui never shrugged. She turned to him now, sensing perhaps that his silence had gone on a little too long, and she reached over and rested a hand near as on the rail of the ship, and she said that he looked tired, that it was only natural after everything they had been through, and that perhaps he was thinking too hard about things that did not need so much thought. "There is always an explanation," she told him, softly, kindly, the way you might reassure a child who has woken from a bad dream. And Ren almost let himself be comforted by it, because her voice really was very gentle, and he really was very tired, and it would have been so easy, right there on the deck with the water darkening below them, to simply close his eyes and let her words carry him the rest of the way home. But there is always an explanation was itself the thing that had begun to frighten him, though frighten was too large a word for how quietly it moved through him, more like a small cold draft finding its way under a door that should have been sealed. Because in his experience, in the experience of anyone who had lived even an ordinary life before all of this, there was not always an explanation. Some things simply were unaccounted for, unexplained, and the people around you either did not know why but did not care to ask. And that not knowing, that little untidy edge of the world, was one of the things that told you the world was old and real and had not been arranged by anyone for your benefit. Yui's world, the world as she described it to him, had no such edges. Everything he had ever wondered about out loud, from the pepper to the daylight, to why every town they entered seemed to already know his name before he gave it, had been met with an answer, promptly, pleasantly, and always just detailed enough to sound complete without ever quite inviting a second question. He began, quietly, almost as a private game with himself, to test her, not unkindly. He did not want to hurt her, but he needed to see the shape of the thing he was circling. He asked her about the priests in the temple 2 towns back, whether she had trained with any of them, and she said yes, of course, and gave him 2 names, warmly, easily, the way an old friend gives you names you should already know. He asked her later that evening whether she remembered a temple like that from before she had met him, from her childhood perhaps, and there was, for the very first time since he had known her, the faintest pause before she answered, no longer than the space between 2 waves, and then she said that of course she did, and gave him a small warm memory of a stone courtyard and the smell of incense. And it was a lovely memory. It really was, and that was somehow the worst part of all. A lovely memory produced exactly when needed. Ren stood at the rail a long while after that, watching the last color drain out of the sea below, and he found himself thinking, not with anger, more with a kind of tired sadness settling slowly into his chest, that Yui was not lying to him. Not in the way people usually lie, with guilt behind their eyes or a story that does not quite hold together. She was doing something stranger than lying. She was supplying him with whatever the moment required, smoothly, endlessly, the way a well never runs dry, because somewhere beneath it there's a spring that simply does not stop, and a person, he thought a real person with a real past, should sometimes come up empty, should sometimes say, I don't remember, or I never asked, or that was before we met and I couldn't tell you. Yui never came up empty. He looked at her now in the last of the light, at the calm and lovely and endlessly patient way she was watching him watch the sea, waiting for whatever question he might ask next. Already, he was quite sure, holding an answer ready for it before he had even chosen the words, and he understood, with a gentleness that surprised him, that this readiness of hers, this bottomless kindness that always had exactly the right thing to say, was not proof that the world made sense. It was proof of the opposite. A world that made sense would have let her be uncertain sometimes, would have let a memory arrive a little late or a little wrong or not arrive at all. And instead, every gap he had ever pointed to have been filled instantly and completely the moment he pointed to it, as though the filling had been prepared the moment he was born to ask. He did not say any of this to her that night. He only reached over and covered her hand with his, because whatever she was, however her answers came to her, she had also been kind to him across every mile of this strange world, and kindness, even kindness with no gaps in it, was still kindness. And he found he did not have the heart yet to ask her the one question that had begun quietly to sit at the very bottom of everything else. He wondered, watching the dark water pass beneath the ship, whether she would have an answer ready for that one too. The ship sailed on through the evening air, steady and unhurried, and Yui, beside him, hummed very softly, a tune he realized he had heard her hum before. Always the same few notes, always in the same gentle key. And he closed his eyes at last, telling himself that tonight, at least, he would let the question wait a little longer and rest. Let that moment rest now, just as it was. There's no need to hurry away from it. No need to hold on to it too tightly, either. Simply let it settle, soft as a breath released into a quiet room. We stay with them a little longer in that same hush, in that same unhurried night. If your eyes have grown heavy, that is all right. Let them close, let your breathing slow, let your shoulders loosen against whatever is holding you right now. The night is still unfolding gently, the way it always does, and there is nowhere else you need to be. Take one slow breath in and let it go. And when you are ready, we drift onward, still within the same story, still within the same quiet dark. In the quiet hall, just outside the throne room, Rin sat down on the cold stone step because his legs had asked him to, and Yui knelt beside him, and for a while neither of them said anything at all. The torches along the wall burned low and slow, the way torches do in the last hour before a battle nobody has started yet, and somewhere far off a door creaked once and then remembered to be still. Ren had already said the hard part out loud, the part about the black pepper, the part about the length of every day and every night being the same no matter how far he traveled. And Yui had not laughed it away this time. She only looked at him the way you look at someone who has finally noticed the thing you have been waiting years for them to notice. Ren asked her, very quietly, how long she had known. Yui told him that she had known from before he knew his own name, and that she was sorry it had taken this long to say so, and that she had hoped, in a small and foolish way, that he would never have to ask. He asked her who she really was, then, and the question came out softer than he meant it to, because some part of him already understood that the answer would change everything behind him without changing anything in front of him. Yui folded her hands the way she always did before a blessing, an old habit, and told him that she was not a priest at all, not really, and that she was not even from this world. She said that where she came from, this whole place, the castle, the road from Aliahan, the count of steps between one town and the next, had been built the way a house is built, board by board, by people who wanted somewhere for a game to happen. Rin did not understand the word at first. Game, the way it landed strangely in a hall built for prayers and swords, and he asked her to say it plainly. So she said it plainly. She told him that far beyond the edge of the world he knew, in a place with no dragons and no shrines, there were runes lit by a paler, steadier light than any lamp he had ever seen. And in one of those rooms a person sat holding something small in both hands, guiding him, guiding all of them, toward Balamus the way a hand guides a piece across a board. She said that she herself was one of the people who had helped build the board, and that her task in her own world was to walk through the finished thing before anyone else ever touched it, to see if the doors opened where they should, to see if the nights and days behaved, to see if anything felt wrong to a person walking through it for the first time. And she said, gently, that he had been right about everything, every strange proportion, every polite coincidence, because he had been the one walking through it, and she had been sent along beside him to watch how it felt. Ren sat very still with that for a moment, the stone step cold under him, and he found himself thinking that a person can hear an enormous thing and feel, at first, almost nothing at all, the way you don't feel a wound in the first second after it happens. He asked her the only question that seemed to matter, which was whether that made him real. Yui told him no, not in the way he meant it, and yes, in every way that had ever felt like something to him. She explained it as kindly as she knew how, that he and Daichi and the priest who had walked beside them, and even Balamus behind the great door, were built the way a lantern is built, out of parts chosen and fitted by other hands, thinking and answering and worrying the way he was worrying now. But none of it started with him. He asked, and his voice had gone very quiet, whether that meant nothing he had felt was true, the fear on the road out of Aliyahan, the relief when a battle ended, the small ordinary fondness he had for the people who traveled with him. Yui said that the feelings themselves were true, every one of them, because a feeling doesn't stop being real just because someone can explain where it came from. And she said this the way you tell a child that the warmth of a blanket doesn't need the wool to have grown itself. But she said, too, that the shape of his whole life, the road he'd walk, the friends he'd meet in Luda's tavern, even the 16th birthday morning his mother had woken him for, had been laid out ahead of him by people who would never meet him and would never need to. Ren asked her, and this time there was no anger in it, only a tiredness that went all the way down, whether she was one of those people. She told him yes, that she was a person from that far, paler world, sent him beside him to test the road, and that somewhere along the way, walking it with him season after season, she had stopped being able to think of him as a thing she was testing. That was the part, she said, that she hadn't planned for, and hadn't known how to explain to the people back in her own world who kept asking her, in their brisk, practical way, whether everything felt right yet. Ren looked at his own hands for a while, turning them over slowly in the low torchlight, the calluses from the sword, the small scar from the wolf outside Reeve, and he found himself thinking that hands built by someone else's design still ached the same, still gripped the hilt the same, and he did not know yet whether that was a comfort or the opposite. He asked her whether the others knew, whether Daichi knew, whether the priest herself had always known and simply chosen, over and over, gently, to say that it was only his imagination. Yui said that some things are easier to carry when only one person carries them, and that she had let him think it was his imagination for as long as she could, not to trick him, but because she had hoped, absurdly, that they could finish the journey before he had to know. She said she was sorry for that now, sitting here with him on the cold step outside a door that would not stay closed much longer. Rin told her, slowly, that he was not sure he was angry, and that this surprised him more than the confession itself had. He said he had expected, if this moment ever came, that he would feel something like betrayal, sharp and immediate, and instead what he felt was closer to the quiet that comes after a long fever breaks, when you are weak and clear at the same time. Yui reached over, then, and rested her hand lightly over his, and she told him that whatever else was true, the hand doing the resting had chosen to do it, and that no one back in her own world had written that particular gesture down for her. Rin looked at their two hands together in the torchlight and did not pull away. He asked her, after a while, what happened to a world like this one, once someone on the other side had walked all the way through it and found no more wrong turns. Yui told him that usually once the walking through was finished, the world was handed over, doors and roads and all, to be given to whoever wanted to walk it next, again and again, each time from the beginning. She said that every time that happened, somewhere in a room she couldn't quite picture from inside this one, a new version of him would wake on his 16th birthday and set out from Aliahan, not knowing any of this, would meet a priest who looked like her and sound like her, and would, in time, on some other night very like this one, ask the same questions all over again. Rin was quiet for a long moment at that, and the quiet had a weight to it, though not the frightened kind. He said, finally, that it was a strange sort of grief to imagine another version of himself starting over without ever getting to keep this conversation, without ever getting to keep her. Yui told him softly that she felt that same strange grief too, more than she had expected to when she first arrived here, back when this was only meant to be an ordinary piece of work. She said that in her world, no one had built her to feel this particular kind of sorrow, and she had wondered, more than once on the long road behind them, whether that meant it wasn't really hers to feel. Ren said that he thought it probably was hers, the same way his own fear on the night before a fight was his, whatever the reason either feeling had first come to exist. He told her that a candle doesn't ask where the flame came from before it agrees to give off warmth, and that this was the closest he could come, right now, to making peace with what she had told him. Yui smiled at that, a small tired smile, and said that he always had a way of finding the gentle version of a hard thing, and that she suspected that particular kindness in him had been there from the very start, whoever had first set it down. The two of them sat like that a while longer, her hand still over his, the torches burning a little lower, the sound of the great door down the hall settling into their old stone silence. Ren asked her, at last, whether she would still be beside him when the door opened, whatever waited on the other side of it, whatever he decided to do about all of this. Yui told him that she had never once, not for a single step of the whole long road, considered doing otherwise. And Run, hearing that, found that some of the ache in his chest had eased, not because the strange, enormous truth she'd given him had gotten any smaller, but because he was no longer sitting with it alone, outside, past the tall windows, the night went on being exactly as long as every other night he had ever counted. And for the first time since he had first noticed that, the sameness of it felt less like a wound and more like a small, steady kindness. Something built for him, perhaps by someone who had wanted him to rest easy. He did not know yet what he would do when the great door finally opened, but he knew that he would walk toward it with her hand still near his, and for tonight, in this low and quiet hall, that was enough of an answer. And so, with the torches burned down soft and gold, and the questions finally spoken instead of carried alone, the two of them let the stillness hold them a little longer before the next thing came. Let that moment rest for now, just as it was, without needing to be finished or explained. Some things settle better in the quiet that comes after them than in the telling itself. And this is one of those nights where the story can afford to breathe. We stay with them a little longer, in that same hush, before the night carries us onward to what comes next. If your eyes have already closed, that is all right. The story will keep unfolding gently around you, at its own unhurried pace, asking nothing of you but rest. Take a slow breath now, in and then out, and let your shoulders soften into the bed beneath you. There is no rush here, no need to hold on tightly to every word. The same night stretches on, patient and low-lit, and it will still be waiting whenever you drift back to it. In a stone hall lit by a single low lamp, a young priest named Yui sat across from a hero named Run, and she was choosing her words the way a person chooses stones to cross a river, slowly and with care. Rin had asked her, in a voice gone quiet with all the asking he had already done that night, what would happen to him after the last battle was over, after the world was safe and there was nothing left to fight. Yui folded her hands in her lap, and for a moment she only listened to the wind moving along the outside of the tower, the way it slipped past the shutters without ever quite getting in. She told him that real people, the ones outside this world of his, did not usually get to choose how their story closed. She said that out there, in the world that had built this one, sickness came for people slowly and without asking permission, that it settled into the body like a tenant who never paid rent and never left. She told him gently about the long illnesses that can wait at the end of a real life, the slow seasons in which the body grows tired and heavy and hard to carry, and how little dignity the world often leaves a person by then, only endurance. She spoke softly of pain that can outlast every comfort, and of nights that go on longer than they should, a kind of suffering that those who have never known it can scarcely imagine, and of how many ordinary lives end that way, quietly worn down rather than gently set free. Most people, she said, did not get to lie down at the end of a long life and simply close their eyes the way a tired child closes them at the end of a warm day. Most people, she said, meet the end after a long weariness in rooms that are not their own, and more often than anyone would wish, quite alone. Rin sat very still while she spoke, his hands resting open on his knees, and he found himself thinking that he had never once, in all his travels, seen an old person in this world grow frail in that particular way. He had seen villagers age gently, their hair silvering like frost settling on a roof overnight, but he had never seen the kind of ending Yui was describing now. And something in him understood, before she finished, that this was exactly her point. Because this world, Yui went on, had been built with a kindness folded into its very bones, a kindness that no one had asked for and that most people would never know to be grateful for, since they would never see what they had been spared. She told him that his story, the one written for him long before he ever opened his eyes on his 16th birthday, ended in a way no real life ever could. After the last great battle, she said after the world had gone quiet and safe again, he would marry Aoi, and there would be a house somewhere with morning light coming through it, and years, ordinary years, the kind made of small breakfasts and small arguments and small forgivenesses. And then, she said, when it was finally time, he would not suffer for it the way real people suffered. He would simply grow tired one evening. The good kind of tired, the kind that comes after a full life rather than an emptied one. And his eyes would grow heavy the way anyone's do at the end of a long, warm day. And somewhere in that heaviness, without pain, without fear, without the long gray corridor that waited for so many others, his story would simply set itself down, gently, the way a parent lowers a sleeping child into a bed without ever waking them. She called it, in the end, the ultimate gift, though she said the word gift carefully, as though she knew it was a strange thing to offer a man who had wanted, more than anything, to be real. Rin looked down at his own hands for a while, turning them slightly in the lamplight, the calluses from the sword he had carried across 3 kingdoms, and he thought that they looked real enough to him. He asked her, quietly, whether she was telling him this to comfort him or because she believed it was true, and Yui admitted that she was no longer sure the two were different things. She told him she had watched him from the very beginning of the journey, had matched her pace to his through forests and along riverbanks, and that whatever else was true about the shape of this world, what she had felt walking beside him had never once felt like a line of code performing warmth. It had felt, she said, like worry when he was hurt, and relief when he was not, and something warmer still on the nights when the fire burned low, and he fell asleep before finishing a sentence. Ren asked, almost to himself, whether it mattered that a feeling was designed, if the feeling itself was the only thing anyone ever actually got to hold. Yui did not answer that right away, and the silence between them was not an uncomfortable one, only the kind that settles over 2 people who are both thinking the same slow thought from 2 different directions. She said at last that she thought about her own endings sometimes too, the wedding that had not yet happened, the years that had not yet been lived, and the soft close that waited somewhere past all of it for her as well, since her story and as it had been written to end together. And she told him that when she pictured it, an old age spent beside him, a final evening where the light in the room simply dimmed the way a lamp dims when its oil is finally spent, she did not feel afraid of it. She felt, if anything, something like envy for anyone who did not know what waited for them, because not knowing was its own kind of heavy thing to carry, and she and Run, whatever else they were, had at least been spared that particular weight. Rin said that he had spent the whole night turning over the idea of the world's cruelty, the strange geometry of it, the impossible tailoring, the crowd that had gathered simply to watch him choose whether to fight or to talk. And in all of that turning, he realized he had never once considered that a kindness might be sewn into the lining of it as well. He asked her whether the real people, out there beyond the edges of this made place, envied him for it. And Yui told him gently that she believed they did, more than he could know, though most of them would never have the chance to say so aloud. She reminded him that somewhere beyond this castle, beyond this lamp and this table and this quiet hour, there were people lying in narrow beds who would have given almost anything for an ending like his, an ending with no pain in it, no fear in it, only the slow closing of two tired eyes after a life that had, on the whole, been good. Rin thought of his mother, the one who had woken him on his 16th birthday, and wondered, not unkindly, whether even she had been written only to make that one morning warm, and whether that made the warmth of it any less real to the boy who had felt it. He decided, somewhere in the quiet that followed, that he did not have an answer to that yet, and that perhaps he did not need one tonight. Yui reached across the table, then, and rested her hand near his, not quite touching, the way people do when they are offering comfort without insisting on it. And she told him that whatever the shape of the world beneath them, the years ahead, however they came to be written, were still as to walk through one morning at a time. She said that a gentle ending did not undo a life. It only closed the book softly instead of tearing the last page, and that there was, she thought, a kind of mercy in a story that let its people rest instead of making them fight to the very last breath simply to be allowed to stop. Rin let out a long breath he had not noticed he was holding, and something in his shoulders loosened, the way a held muscle loosens once it finally understands it is safe to. He said, quietly, that he did not know yet whether to be grateful or sad, and Yui told him that she did not think those two feelings had ever been enemies, that most people who had lived long enough carried both of them at once, in this world or any other. Outside the tall windows, the sky had gone the deep, soft blue of very late night, the kind of blue that has stopped pretending it might still be evening. The lamp between them burned lower, and neither of them moved to trim it, content to let the room grow dim around their conversation the way a good conversation is allowed to fade toward its own quiet close. Rin found himself thinking of Aoi, then, somewhere down the corridor, asleep or pretending to be, and of the years Yui had described, ordinary years, small breakfasts, small forgivenesses, a whole gentle lifetime folded up and waiting for him at the far end of a battle he had not yet fought. And he thought that if an ending had to be written for him, whoever had written it, and for whatever reason they had written it, had at least been kind about the very last part. Yui watched him settle into that thought the way a person settles into a chair they have finally decided is comfortable, and she did not press him further, only sat with him in the low light a while longer, keeping him company the way she always had, all the way from the beginning of the road. And for tonight, that quiet hall, that low lamp, and that one soft understanding between two old companions was enough, and the rest of the story could wait a little longer to be told. Let that moment rest for a while, exactly as it was, without needing to be tidied up or explained any further. We stay with them a little longer, letting the quiet settle over everything like a blanket pulled up to the chin, and there is no need to hurry away from this feeling just yet. If your eyes are growing heavy, that is all right. Let them close and let your breath slow in and out, easy and unforced. The night is still unfolding around them, patient and unbroken, carrying the same story forward the way a slow current carries a leaf, without any effort at all. Rest here for a moment. When you are ready, we drift on together, further into the same night, into what happens next. Deep beneath the ruined castle where the great demon Zoma had fallen, a young man named Ren stood very still in the low orange light of the torches, listening to the last of the dust settle around him. The fight was over, and he knew it the way you know a storm has passed, not by any single sound, but by the shape of the silence that's left behind. Beside him stood Daichi, the warrior, breathing hard and grinning the wide, uncomplicated grin of a man who had just done exactly what he was built to do. A little further back, Aoi the mage lowered her staff, and Yui the priest pressed both hands together in a small, private prayer of thanks. For a moment, all four of them simply stood there in the wreckage of the throne room, and it felt, Ren would say later, like the very last page of a book finally turning still. Daichi was the first to break it, his voice booming down the stone corridor with the kind of joy that doesn't know how to whisper. He said that they'd actually done it, that Zoma was gone, that the world above was safe now, and wasn't that just something? Aoi laughed, a tired, relieved sound, and said that her arms didn't feel like her own anymore, that she'd cast more spells today than in her whole life before it. Yui simply closed her eyes and murmured a quiet thanks to whatever was listening, and for once nobody teased her for it. They began, the way travelers do, to talk about home, about Aliahan's harbor lights, about the smell of bread and Isis, about the soft beds waiting for them somewhere far above this buried dark. And it was into that small, warm current of relief that Ren said, very gently, that he needed to tell them something. Something he'd been carrying, he said, since long before Zoma, since long before Balamus, since a birthday morning he could remember with strange, aching clarity, and yet somehow not remember at all. He told them, slowly and without any drama in his voice, what he had learned in the chamber beneath the world, that this world, all of it, the roads and the rain and the particular blue of the evening sky over Aliahan, had been made the way a house is made, or a song, or a story someone sits down to tell. He said that he didn't say this to frighten them, and that he wasn't frightened himself anymore. Not really, not the way he had been. Daichi's grin had gone somewhere else by then, and he asked, carefully, what exactly Ren meant by that, in a voice that already half expected an answer it wouldn't like. Ren told him plainly that everything, the sunrises, the seasons, even the particular ache of missing someone, had been arranged, tuned, set in place before any of them had taken a single step of this journey. He said he understood now why the wind had always seemed to blow at his back, why the monsters had grown stronger exactly as he had, why the whole shape of the road had bent so neatly around him. It wasn't luck, he said. It was design. And then, because there was no gentle way left to say it, he told them that he had been given a choice. down there in the dark beneath the Demon King's hall, a choice about how his own story was allowed to end. Aoi asked, very quietly, what kind of choice a person could possibly be given about a thing like that. Rin said that he could go home, that the world above would welcome him as a hero, that there would be parades and songs and a wedding in time and a long and gentle life that closed when it closed without any pain at all. A good ending, he said, the kind that most people never get. But he said that ending had already been written, every beat of it, down to the last soft breath, and that no part of it, however happy, would ever truly belong to him. Or, he said, he could stay down here in the sealed world beneath the world, in the dark that no story had ever been written for. There was a silence then, the kind that has weight to it, that presses gently on the chest. Daichi was the one who finally spoke, and his voice had lost its boom entirely, gone soft and low and almost pleading, the way a friend's voice goes when he already senses he's about to lose an argument he doesn't understand. He said that none of this made any sense, that they had a whole world waiting for them, that Run was a hero now, that people would be singing his name for 100 years. Rin told him that he knew, and that none of it was a small thing to walk away from, and that he wasn't walking away from it lightly. But he said that 100 years of songs sung about a life he never chose felt, to him, like a very quiet kind of loneliness, dressed up in trumpets. Yui asked him, then, if he understood what he would be giving up, the wedding, the warmth, the easy, guarded happiness that had been prepared for him like a room turned down for the night. Rin said that he did understand, and that it had taken him a long time, lying awake in 100 different inns along the road, to understand something else in return. That a happiness someone else had already finished writing for him wasn't quite the same thing as a happiness he'd found on his own 2 feet. He said this without any anger at all, which was, in its own way, the strangest part. There was no fight left in him, only a kind of tired clarity, the way a person sounds after they've turned something over in their hands so many times that all the sharp edges have finally worn smooth. Aoi was quiet for a long moment, and Run, watching her, felt something in his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with demons or destiny at all. He told her, gently, that this was the part he dreaded most, that if there was one thread of the old story he still wished he could keep, it was her. And Aoi, wiping at her eyes with the back of one sleeve, asked him whether that feeling, at least, was real, whether that much of it belonged to him, or whether it too had simply been arranged like the weather. Rin said that he didn't know, and that maybe it didn't matter anymore because he had decided somewhere in the walk down to this hall that a feeling you choose to keep holding on to becomes yours regardless of where it started. He said that was the whole of what he'd learned. In the end, that a life handed to you, however gentle, is still a hand-me-down, but a life you build for yourself out of whatever's left, even down here in the dark, is finally entirely your own. Daichi asked, in a voice gone almost small, whether Rin had really thought this through, whether he understood that there would be no more sunlight down here, no more Aliahan mornings, no more ordinary small things like bread and rain. Rin said that he had thought of little else for weeks, and that he was afraid a little of the quiet that was coming. But he said that it would be a quiet of his own choosing, and that after everything, that felt like the rarest thing in the world. He told them that they, of course, were free, that the way up was open, that home was waiting exactly as it always had been, songs and weddings and all, and that no one would think less of them for taking it. And for a moment, none of them said anything at all, the torchlight moving slowly over the old broken stones, patient as it had always been. It was Yui who finally broke that stillness, and she said, in the soft, steady voice she used for blessings, that she had followed him this far already, further than any sensible person should, and that she supposed a little further wouldn't kill her. Aoi laughed then, a wet, surprised sound, and said that if Yui was staying, she certainly wasn't going to be the one left explaining it to everyone back home alone. Daichi looked at the two of them, and then at Run, and let out a long breath that seemed to carry some old weight out of him with it. He said that he'd never once in his life let his friends walk into the dark without him, and he wasn't about to start on the one day actually mattered, and that, more than any spell or any sword, was the thing that finally made Ren's eyes go wet. They didn't leave that night or the next. They simply stayed, the four of them, in the buried world that no story had ever been written for. In time, they found a cavern lit by a soft blue moss that never needed a torch, and a slow underground river that ran cool and clear over pale stones, and they built, without any great ceremony, something that was theirs. Daichi took to shaping the stone with his old sword, cutting benches and steps where none had been before, whistling old marching songs that echoed pleasantly off the walls. Aoi grew small glowing plants from seeds she'd carried without quite knowing why, and watched them open, slow and unhurried, in a light of her own making. Yui tended to the little hurts that gathered along the way, and in the evening she would read aloud from a worn book of old prayers, her voice low and warm against the dark. And Run, when he had a quiet hour to himself, liked to sit near the underground river and simply listen to the water moving over stone, unbothered by any plot at all. He thought, sometimes, of the songs that were surely being sung of him up above, of the hero who had saved the world and then, mysteriously, vanished into it. He found he didn't mind being a mystery, a story that ends in a question he came to feel is still allowed to be a happy one. He was not a puppet down here, and no one was watching to see whether he smiled at the right moment or grieved on schedule, or fell in love exactly when the plot required it. When he laughed now at something Daichi said, or something small and clumsy Aoi did with her glowing plants, it was entirely, unmistakably his own. They say that if you travel far enough beneath the old sealed doors of that ruined castle, past where the maps give up and the torches give way to soft blue moss, you can sometimes hear four voices laughing quietly by an underground river, in a world with no name and no author left to guide it. Not a hero anymore, and not quite an ordinary man either, just Run, sitting by the water with the people who chose, freely, to stay beside him. And that, perhaps, is where this long story finally comes to rest, down in the dark and the quiet, with nothing left unwritten but whatever comes next. And so, tonight's story comes to a quiet close. Whatever tangled feelings carried it forward, the worry, the doubt, the small stubborn hope, have settled now, like dust in still air. There is nothing left to resolve tonight, only rest. Thank you for staying with us through these hours, for letting this voice be the last thing your mind held onto before it let go. Wherever you are listening from, whatever kind of day waits for you tomorrow, I hope tonight gave you something soft to land on. May your sleep be deep and untroubled. May your dreams, if you have any, be kind ones, the kind that dissolve gently at the edges rather than jolt you awake. And may the morning arrive slowly, without rush, without noise, giving you time to remember where you are before the day asks anything of you. If you find your way back here on another night, more stories will be waiting, quiet ones, the way this one was for whenever you need somewhere to rest your thoughts. For now, there's nothing to do, nothing to decide, nowhere to be. Just this stillness and the sound of your own breathing, slowing. Good night.